Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm here with Chris. I think we are both super excited. This is the official great opening launch of this project, which we actually anticipate is probably going to take us a couple of years to do, but it's going to be a couple of exciting years. And I'm really looking forward to going through it all and getting started today. So, if you're joining us, you might even be wondering what actually is this thing that I just signed up and started watching. So, this is the introductory episode of our series on what it is to be a philosophical liberal. And this is based on a statement that Chris and I crafted. And I should share with you right off the bat that when we drafted this statement, we got it to a state where I will say, in my opinion, I think we're about 96% of the way there, but there's still refinements that we are even trying to make with this statement before we get into what we think will be a good finalized form. And this is, of course, recognizing that perhaps nothing is ever really finalized on planet Earth here. But even just to get it to, let's say, 99.9% is part of why we're even going on this journey. What you're going to hear is that Chris and I are really going to go through the statement and analyze, chew, digest, and think aloud in public about these ideas. This is a project for both of us to explore these ideas in greater depth. And what we really want to do is open up this conversation to the world, to anyone who would be interested and perhaps might already consider themselves to be a philosophical liberal. You might read our statement and see yourself reflected in there. Or maybe even better, it will provoke you to think about your own positions, about what you think about a free society, how one builds a good society, a great society, and also a good human life. And even more than that, a great human life, and the way that those are intertwined. So, as I said, we are kicking off this series, and we are starting with what is perhaps the obvious question for a project that's all about philosophical liberalism to pose that question. What is philosophical liberalism? So, I guess, Chris, I will turn it over to you, and maybe we can start off with obviously, we have the statement that people can read. That's the full statement, but we probably should have something that's more like the elevator pitch. What is the two-sentence brief summary description of what is philosophical liberalism?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. As Joya said, I share the enthusiasm for us launching the Philosophical Liberal here on Substack. Thank you for joining us. And I'm actually a little surprised that you gave us a 96% rating on our statement. So I probably would have given us a little more room to improve, as well as, as Joya may have mentioned, our intention that as we go on this journey, that we will even receive great ideas and feedback that will help us shape it. So, but nonetheless, we're definitely on the way. So yes, starting with the statement, kind of the elevator pitch for what is philosophical liberalism, that I would say is it is a set of political, moral ideas and ideals for unleashing maximum human freedom, flourishing, and greatness. And it's also a practical framework for understanding the connections between those three core values to help make them concrete for people so that they're not so abstract, and offering guidance on how to practice them in one's daily life so that we can help build a wider culture of philosophical liberalism.
I think that's a wonderful summary. And I will say the 96% comes from, well, one, I know how hard you and I worked on this statement, really
Fair
wordsmithing it and
enough.
trying to get our words as precise as we could to the ideas that we had at the time that we had them. And also, I had the pleasant experience of recently rereading the statement and being pleasantly surprised by how accurately I thought we captured the ideas that we were trying to express. So perhaps that's a segue into what something that we will continuously do during the series, which is to actually start to read from parts of the statement so that we can start to take it apart and build it back up again and really analyze what's going on. So I thought I would share what we actually wrote in the preamble, which
Yeah,
sets
and
us up
and then
for
we can kind of compare the two. Yeah.
exactly. Well, I
See how we
mean,
did.
it's not exactly comparison. It's in a certain sense apples to oranges. It's not the elevator pitch. It's the preamble is the starting off launching point for the rest of the
Hmm.
document. But hopefully, it
Hmm.
will even help give the audience. If you haven't yet had an opportunity to check out our website, I probably should
Check
mention
it out.
that this project. It's sponsored by our organization, which is 1776 Forward. So you can find us at 1776forward.com, and that's where you will find the statement written out in full. And when you find that, I will read what the preamble of our statement on philosophical liberalism is. So the official statement that we have says that philosophical liberalism is a set of moral political ideas ultimately advocating a free society. It shares with other forms of liberalism a focus on individual rights, the consent of the governed, political equality, and free enterprise. However, it grounds the needs for and benefits of that free society in a wider range philosophical view of human nature at our best. That is a philosophy to maximize human flourishing and human greatness. And as I think you alluded to, the three concepts, the main concepts that you and I pulled out of this, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that we actually made sure to focus on in that statement, were these three concepts of freedom, flourishing, and greatness. And we should let everyone know we're going to do deeper dives on all of those concepts and really get into some of the technicalities of the definitions, the applications, but for the purpose of just getting us started, uh, Chris, you had the wonderful idea of maybe just trying to express it in more of an artistic, emotional way to really capture the spirit of what it is that we mean by this vision that we want to put out there into the world and make real.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think I'm just excited about this whole project. This is exactly what we're intending to do is, as we look to build this movement for this concept of philosophical liberalism, we know we want to first create the foundation for understanding what it means. And that's what this project is all about and us chewing on it. So, as Joya mentioned, I think the three most important concepts to pull out of even the definition of philosophical liberalism is freedom, flourishing, and greatness. Those are our three cardinal values that kind of give purpose and aim to the entire project. They're what we're all about and aiming for. And I even like that there's kind of an inherent logic connecting the three in that, and as we will kind of expound upon in the weeks and months ahead as we dive into each individual concept is, freedom kind of begets flourishing and flourishing begets greatness. And that formulation, we're going to draw out the connection to it. And, to put it in, kind of the more artistic overall vision terms of what we envision, why we're so excited about even this project is, the way I think about it is through full freedom to think and act on our thoughts and dreams that our human nature requires, with the only limiting factor being our unbreached respect for the right of every other human being to do the same, we can achieve unparalleled heights of creative potential, much greater than we ever have before when our minds and our hands are unleashed into full harmony and integration, especially when we're freed to create and trade with others who are doing the same in their own lives. So to me, that is really, the promise of full freedom, flourishing, and greatness. And it also allows us to live a life of continuous betterment, learning, virtuous character, all of which, in my mind at least, are what make life meaningful and give the source of true lasting happiness. And kind of the link to politics here is that when we can build a wider culture and political society that protects this life of freedom for each of us, our future is unlimited and unbound. We can have one of unending progress, peace, and prosperity. So that to me is what full flourishing, freedom, and greatness is about.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'll let people know that behind the scenes, we've been calling this a painting poem or a poem painting, and getting at the fact that I have a background in English and literature and I love poetry. Chris has a background in architecture and visual design and obviously loves painting. But what I love about your statement is that there is real poetry to it, even alliteration at the very end. So I love the words of it. I'm hoping that you write it out. I would definitely take that and put it up as a nice plaque on my wall. And
I
when I went
will.
to do this assignment, interestingly, I didn't focus so much on the words as more of the visual image of what it was that I really wanted to capture. When I thought about trying to capture the emotional essence of what freedom, flourishing, and greatness are all about. And the visual image that I have is the visual image of a spiral, and this spiral that is continuing to rise and expand as it rises. And that's how I think about this, following the logic that you mentioned. There is the spiral, the somewhat of the chicken and egg like problem of the good society and the good individual, which comes first. And I mean, of course, we know from evolution that the chicken and egg problem was never really a chicken and egg problem, right? That there was some organism that probably looked more like a fish and not anything like a chicken that started laying eggs that were probably looked more like tadpole eggs, right? And evolution works. But interestingly, I think as we start to explore this in depth, that metaphor I think might actually even start to apply with what it is that we're building, because you don't need to start with the fully realized forms of the good society or the good individual, but there is the way in which they feed each other, that the greater society that you're able to build, that enables and empowers more flourishing great individuals, and those great individuals can contribute to making the society even greater. And there is, I think, this wonderful spiraling up vortex experience that comes when you have freedom leading to flourishing, leading to greatness. And we hope to be individuals and also putting together community and society that really gets this spiral and this vortex going in full force.
I love that. Well, for somebody who says they didn't focus on the words, that still was very poetic in my mind. Very visual too, and I see it, but also very poetic. So I like the combination of those two. Maybe we'll work offline on how we can maybe merge them, but hopefully for everyone listening out there, you kind of get a sense of what animates us at least, and what to us is the ultimate end goal of philosophical liberalism, of building a free society, and what the end means when we say unleashing maximum flourishing and greatness. Anything else you want to add to that point, Joya?
I think this is, we want to keep it a little bit, we want to keep the intrigue here as well, because as I said, we're going to go, the whole point of doing this series is so that we can do this very detail-oriented kind of deep dive into the specifics. This really just is our general overview, and hopefully we've piqued interest in what this is
Right.
all
So
about.
if you want, said another way, if you are keen to learn more about our views on freedom, flourishing, and greatness individually, there is definitely more to come on each of those. So if it still seems a little vague and or abstract, just hold on tight, put a pin in that, which, for those of you who may have listened to our preview episodes that we released last fall, we are going to have a section called the pins where when things come up, we're going to return to them in a different forum. In this case, these will be part of our official series, but we're just putting a pin in them till the weeks when we get to those questions. So, and I just want to maybe add here while we're talking about the structure of the series that a key principle of all of this is, and why Joyous said we felt that our statement gets at 96% of the way. I probably am a little lower there, but regardless of the number, there's more room for improvement, is that we are thinking aloud in public is a phrase we like to use, and a principle, more importantly, an ethos that we're following, in that we don't presume to know all the answers, and we are still creating and experimenting this ourselves as we go along the way. And so this series is our own effort to both flesh out and finesse what we're creating to get to that 99 or 100% level. I'll probably never say we get to 100.
99.999. Let's
99.9.
make
Okay,
that the
we'll go
goal.
with that. but also, and then for us to model what I think is just an ethos that we want to promote more broadly in the culture, more generally in the culture, is feeling feeling confident and encouraged to think aloud in public, even when you don't necessarily have all of the answers or everything figured out in your own head. That is a key way in which we encourage knowledge and trade and collaboration and continuous betterment, which are all virtues and values that we're going to also dive into and that you'll find echoed in our statement.
Yes. I would say the best questions are the ones that you can't look up the answer on Google, the ones that actually do challenge you to create, discover, refine new answers. And that's part of what we're doing. And I want to make sure that we also make sure that we point out that we're doing this together. But another huge point of putting this out in the world is to get feedback. We really do want to make this a conversation, not just
Yeah,
between me and Chris,
absolutely.
but with you in the audience as well. And we'd love to hear feedback on the ideas and even feedback on how maybe you could get involved, because that is part of this process and how I think it will grow and how we will actually get to the 99.999% that I think should be our high hard goal.
Well, and to create that beautiful spiral, that image that you just painted for us of the society of individuals pursuing greatness. So the more engagement and interaction, participation we get from all of you out there listening, the more we hope to build that very society. So I think that actually is a good segue into we've hopefully both sketched out and defined well enough what we mean, the what of philosophical liberalism, as well as piqued your interest to learn more to come. But there's also the how component of what we're doing here. So, Joya, maybe do you want to talk to that at all?
Yes, and I'd love to say that I'm one of those people who absolutely believes that you really can never fully uh, distinguish the what from the how, that the
Mm,
how always has some bearing on what the what happens to be. And Chris and I have
mm.
thought long and hard precisely about how we are approaching this. And the how is part of the what, I would say. And it's a part of, I think, what makes our approach distinctive, unique, innovative, and I would say hopefully effective. And so or how we actually already alluded to this and went into more depth in our early episode. So, if you're finding this now, you might know that this is our official launch, but we had an early pre-launch a couple months ago just to get this started and start to generate some early buzz and interest. And in there, we went into a little bit more depth. So, I'm going to refer people back to that earlier episode where you can find out a little bit more about this. But in essence, our how is a melding of both thought and action. And we really take an entrepreneurial approach to both thought and action. And in terms of the thought, the thinking, we're really attempting to live up to a first principles approach. And again, I refer you to the earlier episode to see exactly what we mean by a first principles approach. But it's one that we've seen some of the greatest entrepreneurs of our era take, and that has enabled them to have quite outstanding results. Elon Musk is, of course, the signature example. Probably, if in the culture you know this idea of first principles thinking, he's the name that often comes up with that term. And so there's the thinking and then also the action. And we like to think about this in terms of stepping into your power and reclaiming your political power. And so combining both that thought and the action, your deep first principles thinking and your recognizing the power that is within you. It's both political power and your energetic power as a human being to affect change and greatness in the world is part of what we're going to explore and how we're going to explore this topic as we go through this series.
I love that. And as perhaps the definition stickler, well, we both care about definitions, but I'm always coming back to them for my own understanding and my own learning. I think it's a key part of one's own concept formation and coming to know what you really believe and think, I often ask, okay, well, what do we mean by this? So, even and this is, I think, a demonstration of exactly what Joya means by taking a first principles approach. For those of you who have seen our preview episode, or those of you who have not, I'll just give a brief recap. But by first principles approach, we mean breaking it down to the essential ideas that can't be further reduced or defined by other ideas. And then from that kind of essential foundation, building something new, creating something new from that. So that's kind of what we mean by a first principles approach. We think it is, inherent to the act of entrepreneurialism, but it does beg the question, well, what does entrepreneurialism mean? What is an entrepreneur, and then how is what we're doing that? So Joy and I talked offline a little bit about what even that means. So we thought we would start with a definition and then try and connect it back to the two thought and action principles that Joy just outlined. So I guess it's interesting when Joy and I were talking about this offline. We first referred to um, the dictionary definition. Dictionary.com is what I often use, the little app on your phone. It's great
It's
resource.
the first default for
It's
everyone.
the
I think it
first
has to
default,
be.
yeah. And usually and that's my process. Usually when I am thinking through, is I'll go to that and see if I like the reference, if it resonates with what I'm thinking the concept means in my mind. Um, and when I read it to Joya, we both kind of said, it doesn't quite, capture the full scope of what we mean. But then I did also share with her that I just so happened, as part of my own entrepreneurial journey, which I'm sure we'll talk about, I happened to be in a co-working space recently that had a really cool, almost as an artwork emblazoned on one of the walls in the space, a definite, a spew of definitions defining entrepreneur. So I'll just read them to hopefully kind of tease this issue out. So it says, a person who has possession over a company, enterprise, or venture and assumes significant accountability for the inherent risks and the outcome. So that was kind of the original formal definition, and then they go on to give other aspects of it. An innovator of business enterprise who recognizes opportunities to introduce a new product, a new process, or an improved organization. Self motivated, has the ability to dream and to build when others see nothing, is willing to fail in order to succeed, will stand erect, proud, and unafraid in any circumstance, thrives on the thrill of fulfillment, one who thinks and acts for oneself, and prefers the challenges of life versus conforming. So I loved it. I took a photo of it because it resonated so much with me. So, Joya, what do you think of that definition? Do you have anything to add or that you want to add to that or comment
Well,
on?
I'll first say I love how whoever this author was approached the definition. That, as you pointed out, they started with just the typical dictionary definition that any of us could find with the quick Google search online, but went from the specifics of starting a business, taking on the risk, to the character traits that are required to be a successful entrepreneur and glorifying what those traits are. And I really appreciate this resonates with me in some of my own work as an entrepreneur. I've thought a lot about what it means to be an entrepreneur. One of the projects that I've worked on that we are definitely going to come back to, I guess this is another pin, we're going to have a whole episode on being a what I call a Renaissance human and what that means, how to be a Renaissance human in the 21st century. And in working on that, I thought about the different characteristics that I thought every Renaissance human in the 21st century ought to have. And really, that's everyone, because we all, I believe, have more potentialities than most of us live up to. And we ought to try to live a fuller Renaissance vision of who we could be. And there's something about the entrepreneurial spirit. So when we think of entrepreneurs, the dictionary definition always goes first to having that business venture, but the entrepreneurial spirit is something so much wider. And what I love even about the longer definition you captured is that it really went from that more targeted, specific definition of the entrepreneur starting a business to the characteristics of the entrepreneurial spirit. And I had tried to capture that in my own formulation of what I thought it meant to be an entrepreneur, the way that I think everyone ought to aspire to be entrepreneurial in their lives, and the way that I wrote it out, that what it is to be an entrepreneur, that role that you ought to take on in your life is taking an active role to start up a long-term project, whether a business venture, social organization, community initiative, or personal project, being both mission driven and results oriented. And so to me, the key terms in all of this was the idea of a startup, of doing something new, of it being something more long term, although of course that's somewhat relative, but generally even when we think of being entrepreneurial, it's not just something that you start up for a day or two. And then, most significantly, this idea of being both mission driven and results oriented. To me, those are the two key components of the entrepreneurial spirit that, as we're going to get into uh, detail later, I think are even key to what it is to live a flourishing life. And this is just part of being an entrepreneur. And then again, this, to bring it back to what we're talking about now, that this entrepreneurial approach is part of what we're building into what we're doing with this series, with our own organization, with what we're hoping to inspire out in the world. That we're both trying to speak out these ideas while we simultaneously practice the ideas that we are working to articulate.
Wonderfully said, and I love how you connected it back to this point of, after we define what entrepreneurialism means, like, how does that tie back to when we say we're taking an entrepreneurial approach here? Because I think from all of the different definitions we provided, hopefully some of those themes of both the thoughtfulness, the creativity, the inherent in thoughtfulness, and then
The
the
experimentation, the willingness to
experimentation and the
fail. We
action.
we, we should probably let people know. I mean, I think we already did that we have not gotten this all fully um, sorted out yet.
Yeah.
That we're gonna have failures along the way. It's part of our method of thinking aloud in public is
Hmm.
recognizing the necessity of failures in order to get the lessons that are
Yeah,
important.
exactly. And so, as Joya said, we hope to model these principles and this spirit of entrepreneurialism in what we're doing here. And then I think there's even a second layer to how what we're doing is entrepreneurial in the sense that both how we have chosen to structure our own activities with 1776 Forward as a for-profit business, and as well as what we hope to inspire in other leaders who will join us in this movement to grow philosophical liberalism is hopefully inspire in them new ways of pursuing their own profitable ventures to promote the ideas and ideals of philosophical liberalism. So that is another way in which we hope to bring that entrepreneurial spirit to this realm, which more often than not historically has kind of eschewed that spirit or seen it as just totally irrelevant to this mission of building a free society and encouraging human flourishing and greatness.
I'd like to add quickly that the way I see it, to sum it up really briefly, is that it is the entrepreneurs of the world who change the world for the better. And so, part of how we're thinking about how to have an effective movement in politics is a movement that is able to bring the entrepreneurs together and create a system that empowers the entrepreneurs, the best of the entrepreneurs, to then go out and produce the best for themselves and all of humanity.
I love it. Well said. So, maybe we just I think there's two other key points that we want to just emphasize as we kind of wrap up the this question of what is philosophical liberalism. And Joy, I don't know if you want to take them or if you want me to kind of start off, but we both had talked through, at least two kind of points we wanted to note here or caveats, if you will. Um, So, I guess the first one is, well, yeah, the first one is that it kind of begs the question, well, why do we need this? And especially, we call it philosophical liberalism. We're going to get into why we chose both of those words, but for those who are familiar with the term liberalism, at least, which most everybody in the Western world is, and especially in American context, that has a certain meaning and evocation. So I mean, it's even why we chose to append or add on the word philosophical here, is that we are distinguishing ourselves from other forms of liberalism, and so that's something we want to make note of here, as even the formal preamble that Joya read off from our statement, and that you'll see we do kind of articulate where we share some of the core values and political objectives with other forms of liberalism, but what we're trying to create or articulate here is something different from that, and we're going to get into that in subsequent episodes of what we mean, where those differences are, and why they're, I guess, significant. But that's one point we wanted to note. Joya, do you want to maybe take the second one?
Sure. And just to say that not only subsequent, but very much upcoming episodes. So if this piques your curiosity, our next couple episodes, one will be about what exactly is liberalism. What do we mean by that term? What has it meant historically? And then how we differentiate, well, the commonality between what we're doing and those forms of liberalism. And then also then what differentiates us from the other forms of liberalism that have come before us. So that's liberalism. And then also upcoming, we're going to have a whole episode delving deep into the concept of philosophy and why we've chosen to describe what our project is as philosophical liberalism. And I guess I'll explain this one because it's one that I feel very strongly and passionately about, thinking about the extent to which our project, the way I like to think about it, is that it is philosophical, but without being a full philosophy. And again, I think this is something really important about what we are doing and distinctive about what we are doing. So, absolutely, what we are doing is philosophical. We are laying out what I like to think of as a framework of ideas that are philosophical. They are, as we described, moral, political, and also even metaphysical, because we're really talking something about the metaphysics of humanity. And we even get into maybe a little bit about epistemology, although not perhaps so much, but you'll see we're going to have episodes about reason and emotion and cognition in that way. But we're definitely laying out a framework that is philosophical. But our purpose in this framework is to organize a movement of diverse individuals. So it is very important to me that what I think has even been lacking in previous approaches is that you need to have a certain amount of organization that is philosophical. You need to have fundamental convictions, beliefs, and principles that a group of people can organize around while still allowing for the diversity and the individuality of each specific individual to bring their own philosophy. So, this is just a precursor to say we're going to have a whole episode on what exactly is philosophy. And I'm going to make an argument that I think every individual has their own philosophy, that it is, in fact, an organic thing in that your philosophy, I do believe, grows with you, or ideally ought to, as you grow as a person. And that recognizing that each individual has their own specialized, unique philosophy, that there's still a value to having uh, a framework of philosophical ideas that a group of people can agree upon, that can allow us to come together and form an effective movement. So I'd say even, this whole project started with a realization that Chris and I each have our own distinctive philosophies, but this is a common core of fundamental beliefs that we can agree upon and then therefore create a movement around. And I'll point out this is very much an entrepreneurial way of thinking. Most entrepreneurs, maybe they don't go quite to the deepest philosophical level, although some of the best definitely do. They do absolutely come up with a mission statement and values statements that serve this exact purpose, a way to connect with fundamental ideas and organize diverse individuals in a way that brings out the strengths of those individuals, but still allows them to work together toward a common goal.
Well said, and I love that analogy you just used, going back again to tying it back to the entrepreneur's approach, and even earlier when you invoked Elon Musk, we kind of um, not necessarily take inspiration because we follow this approach just by our own method anyways, but we certainly take comfort from the fact that he has championed a so-called first principles approach to his own work, because I think it does highlight this point that the best entrepreneurs do kind of make that connection between not only the action of business and what they're trying to create, but the thought that underlies it, and ultimately, hopefully, asking some of those fundamental questions, first principles approach. So, and I'll just let it be said that I completely agree with Joya here on the importance of drawing this distinction. You could say the elevator pitch of this point is philosophical liberalism. It's philosophical, but it's not a whole philosophy,
Mhm.
to sum it up. So that was just a key point we wanted to emphasize, and more to come on just the topic of philosophy for those everyone who's interested on it. So that's the what is philosophical liberalism in a nutshell. There are some other thoughts of that just come up, I think, that we wanted to share as we kind of open this series, which is, in addition to kind of laying out our vision of what we mean and how we plan to go about it, is, kind of raises the question, particularly in light of the bullet we just mentioned about um, other forms of liberalism that are obviously already out there. Why do we need this concept?
Exactly. Well,
So
we covered the what and the how, so the next logical question is the why. Why do we need this? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and Joya, I liked how you put this. We both put it in our own words, and then find a way to harmonize them. Joya has a great way of words, so she kind of nicely framed us as in our view, this concept is both timeless and timely. So maybe do you want to take the first one, what you mean by that?
Sure. And well, I mean, this one is absolutely in my wheelhouse. Well, it's somewhat in both of our wheelhouses because I think as we go through this series, everyone is going to see that the kind of both and approach to many seeming polarities or seeming dichotomies is part of the philosophical framework that we are going to bring to a lot of these questions. But the
That it's a
integration
false
of
binary, in other
yes,
words,
exactly.
maybe.
But the
Yes.
integration of the seeming polarity of timeless and timely is one of the ones that is most important to my own particular work, my which focuses on elevating luxury entrepreneurs. And luxury is all about integrating both of these, the timeless and the timely. So it's one that it's, of all of the both ands that we think and talk about a lot, this is one that I think about all of the time just because it's so pertinent to what I do literally every day in my work. And but it's absolutely relevant to our project here as well. That the why answer to why we need philosophical liberalism, there's both, I believe, a timeless reason and aspect to it and a timely. So let's start with the timeless. There are timeless philosophical questions that we are exploring. And this goes back to some of those ancient writings across different civilizations have been asking variations of what is the good society and what is the good human life. And I would say Chris and I have even elevated this because, given the nature of our ambitions, we really want to ask what is the great society and what is the
Mhm.
great human life. And recognizing that, as I kind of shared in the beginning of my idea of the spiral, that there really is a kind of symbiotic, synergistic relationship between these two. But that's a huge part of what we're going to be exploring, this very timeless question of what makes the great society and the great human life. And that's the timeless exploration. And then, of course, there is the timely. And do you want to maybe take that one, Chris, or do you have more to say about timeless?
Yeah, just I mean, you said it so beautifully, but I guess just an inherent plug of the importance of asking these questions in the first place. Kind of again extending that first principles approach that we are all about and want to model, and that we think is is kind of inherent to a ideal method for any type of creative endeavor that you undertake. I can't emphasize enough, and part of why we even launched this project was for our own effort to answer these questions for ourselves and the value and import of asking and coming up with your own, as Joya said, we all kind of ultimately develop our own philosophy. And the way you do that ideally is by consciously asking some of these fundamental questions about what is the great life and what is the great society and how do I work to achieve it. So that's, I guess, just a plug that we, in any era, hopefully as many humans as possible are asking that question. And part of this project is to help encourage more people to ask that question and to see how accessible it is to anybody and everybody to ask that question. You don't have to be a philosophy expert or major to do so. So, in that sense, that's all I'll add on the timeless part. And then in the timely part, I think this even goes to why Joy and I even founded 1776 Forward in the first place, which was, as liberty lovers and, given our history, which we talked about in the prior episodes, but we go back many years, I won't say the number, to our college days, advocating and activating for the cause of liberty. Um, just over the years, I think anybody involved in these issues can undeniably see that there's been a decline in human freedom across the world and here at home in America. And so it's timely in the sense that we felt now is the time to really ask these questions and reacquaint and rechampion these values for as many people as possible so that we can hopefully turn that tide, so to speak.
Although it's interesting because when you say that, it occurs to me that even in our approach to this, we've perhaps not intentionally, but been on both the timeless and the timely, because it occurs to me that you and I have been having these conversations and discussing these issues for as long as we've known each other, which is over 20 years at this point, which is why I think we've just given up counting. Um, so in that sense, it has been even, timeless for the
That's
duration of
true.
our
That's
our
true.
friendship.
Yeah.
But then also obviously that, when we started 1776 Forward, it was precipitated by events that were happening in 2020, and we were clearly responding to the timeliness of the moment with our timeless interest in these questions.
That's right. And I think there's another dimension to the timeliness part as well, which is that you know, we stand on the shoulders of giants, as they say, and we're at a moment in human knowledge, evolution, and development, and even just scientific advancement, where, well, and just historical advancement, where we now have both the 250-year history of America and the experiment of America as a free society, the first one founded in that ideal, however imperfect, as well as the wider Western world, and then
And the
beyond,
Eastern world too.
well, and beyond,
Mhm.
that has since kind of followed that lead of liberalism and liberalizing. We have the lessons from that of how we can build a better, freer society, and then we also have the more recent advancements and insights that we're gaining from fields as diverse as neuroscience and human psychology, emotion, creativity, all these other things that we hope to also draw upon to, frankly, to draw out these concepts of what is flourishing and greatness and how do we achieve them and the connection to human freedom.
Absolutely. I'll share just personally, and hope people are going to find out that you will hear me referring back to lessons I've learned from ancient Japanese martial artists and ancient philosophers like Aristotle, and then also from cutting edge neuroscience in positive psychology works of Abraham Maslow and Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Like all of that has come to inform my own personal philosophy of what flourishing is all about and how to live a great life and build the great society. And so we want to take that full scope and bring it to this project that we are doing now, to do it now, to create a better world for us now and into the future.
Love it. So that covers our what, why, and how. whatever order, or what, how, and why, I guess is the
Yes.
order we just covered through. So I guess that leaves the who and the where, right? And the when. The when is the time is now. The where is wherever you're listening. Although, you
The
know,
beauty of the digital era that we live in.
yes, exactly. Although for anyone who cares and who's out there listening, Joya specific, well, I specifically am calling in most times from Miami, Florida, which is where I'm based.
Yes. Oh, I'm just going to share where I'm
I
from.
didn't want to like steal your thunder, so or take your own words out of your mouth. So
I mean, you know where I am, I think that I'm
most
calling
days.
in from just outside of New York City in New Jersey. Although it's interesting because we're, as we pointed out, the way we've laid this out, we anticipate that this project is going to take us over 2 years, and I would anticipate that I think both you and I will probably be traveling at different points along those 2 years. So we might come to you from all sorts of different places. And part of making this project both timeless and timely, like all the great works, is that I my hope for what we are doing is that this is going to be incorporated into the AI technology that is just coming into being as we are recording this, and that thousands of years from now, when human beings are exploring the frontiers of planets in outer space, that maybe you are this person thousands of years from now, dear listener, watcher, viewer, however you are getting this information from some planet far away from Earth. So,
And a time far in the past, right?
well, we are speaking to you from a time far in the
Yeah, yeah,
past.
yeah, that's what I
The way
mean.
that Aristotle speaks to
Right.
me.
The timeless aspect of it. Yeah, I love
Yes.
that. And more particularly the where is wherever you are listeners and our leaders are who are joining this movement are calling
Mhm.
in from. And in fact, we look forward to seeing where this network builds and how far it reaches.
Yeah. And where you're bringing freedom, wherever it is that you are.
Right.
Mhm.
And so then I guess that just leaves the who. So we thought that maybe we would just end by, especially for those who maybe didn't see the preview episodes that we released in the fall, just a little bit more about our background, who we are, why we're speaking to you on these matters, and I guess what you can expect from us.
Yeah, and so we can let people know that, as I said, I mentioned before, we have a website, 1776forward.com. You can find like our brief bios there. It links to our LinkedIn profile, so you can find out more about us there. But yeah, we just give you maybe a little bit more insight into our journey and why we're doing this project.
Yeah, so Joy, you had asked me a couple of questions on this, and maybe we'll just kind of ask each other, but as a way to kind of frame it up and connect it back to kind of our entrepreneurial theme, which is just like telling telling our stories or a little bit of our background and how that kind of entrepreneurial journey informs what we're looking to do here. So why don't we just start with why don't you tell us what your journey is?
Well, it's interesting because when people hear your story, they're going to hear that, well, as long as I've known you, which is over 20 years now, it was always your goal and intention to be an entrepreneur, although you did not have a straight line path to that. Whereas, interestingly enough, I began my career with no intention at all of being an entrepreneur. Interestingly, it's interesting when I look back on my own life because I reflect that when I was a teenager in the 1990s, entrepreneur wasn't even a word in my vocabulary. I distinctly remember when I was seeing the career counselors that you go to in high school and early days of college, that entrepreneur wasn't even a word. Well, by the time I got to college, entrepreneur was a word that was out there, but it was associated specifically with essentially tech bros, people out in Silicon Valley, and by tech bros I mean women too. You're
Mm.
definitely included in my vision of who these early entrepreneurs were. But it wasn't something that I saw for myself at all. And when I began my career, I was inspired by the experiences I had my first semester in college. There were aspects that I absolutely loved about the college experience that I knew I wanted my career to be all about this. So, one of the things that I absolutely loved about the college experience was that it was all about pursuing the frontiers of knowledge, that everyone who was a professor in academia was pushing to, they found whatever their specialization was, but they were pushing to that edge frontier of the forefront of the latest, greatest, newest ideas. I absolutely loved that. I absolutely loved the community of the university, that you had all of these experts who were all striving to be at the forefront of their fields, coming together and sharing their ideas, and through sharing their ideas, helping each other to make even greater achievements. And then personally, I loved the self directed aspect of being a professor. This is one thing I absolutely do remember from my career counseling at the time, was that it was pointed out to me that at the time that being a professor was a kind of job where you could have sort of the most self-direction and control over your career, and that was greatly appealing to me. So then I went through this whole journey of going into academia, going into English specifically. And because I loved how by studying English and language, it was a way to get into analyzing philosophy and psychology and history. And I really used English as a platform to really study the humanities broadly and have that broad integrative scope. But it became very clear that my approach to the humanities was not the approach that was being advocated in universities, specifically in English departments. And I think what the world has seen to how universities have changed in the past years or so. But I could see the negative aspects of where the universities were going. This was already around 2010. But at that point, I could also see the promise of the internet and what that makes possible in terms of spreading ideas and spreading action, making things happen. So then I had this process of deciding to leave my career in academia, still with all the enthusiasm and fervor for the ideas that I was most passionate about, and then kind of figuring out how to build a business doing that. And I've definitely gone through the entrepreneurial experience of having lots of experiments and failures and lessons. And I've really got it to a point where I've really crystallized that my own mission now is focusing on a new vision of luxury and luxury entrepreneurship, where luxury is made synonymous with self actualizing, with excellence and human flourishing and greatness. So now I'm taking action to elevate other entrepreneurs in doing that. And then, well, I feel like I've been talking a lot and I want to switch it over to you, but I do want to say something too about some of the work that I've been doing now, where part of this vision of luxury is building wealth for yourself and also having greater causes that you generate wealth and activate for. And I also then work with other entrepreneurs, specifically entrepreneurs in Africa, to bring prosperity to Africa through entrepreneurship. But I'm going to turn it over to Chris because I've been talking about myself way too much.
No, well, I mean, this is what it's all about, is letting people know our stories and kind of where we come from. And as Joy mentioned, we kind of, and we were talking about this offline even, is how we both kind of come and bring different strengths to the table, because whereas she came more from the thought world of academia and never assumed being an entrepreneur, I'm kind of the exact opposite, in that I always kind of knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and my whole career has been in the business world. That's my background and where I come from. But I always had a passion for ideas, philosophy, asking these fundamental questions, just being curious and a questioner, but never thought that that would take the shape it is now with what I'm doing here and what we've started with 1776 forward. Um, but as Joya mentioned, my for as long as I can remember, my passion was buildings, architecture, skyscrapers in particular, but really all forms of architecture. But I realized early on that as much as I loved the design aspect of it, it was the businessmen, specifically the developers, who actually built the buildings, and that's what I wanted to make sure I could do one day. So I took the intentional path of going into business. Um, but as Joy mentioned, and I always knew that that would culminate in me being an entrepreneur, specifically a commercial real estate investor and developer. Um, but I've taken a circuitous route, if you will, to the entrepreneurial path. I kind of chose purposefully to go through the corporate world first, learn and build the skills and network and experiences that I knew that world could give me in a blue chip way. So I started off working with a major developer in New York City, Larry Silverstein, an icon of the industry and one of the men that I look up to, certainly as an ideal entrepreneur, rebuilding the World Trade Center in the aftermath of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. That was a personal project and labor of love of mine and gave me an early exposure to being an entrepreneur. And then I worked my way up the ranks on Wall Street, first in the investment banking world and then eventually the investment management world, all related to commercial real estate. And for nearly 13 years, I climbed up the ranks to a senior executive in a large sovereign wealth fund, a company called GIC for the government of Singapore, but working in their commercial real estate investment group and running several of the commercial real estate groups within the US region there. And then within the past year, that entrepreneurial call came to me again, and I answered it. So I am now making this transition from the corporate world to the entrepreneurial world. And frankly, part of that call was, as much as I loved the experience of what I did on Wall Street and in the corporate world, I also realized that my vision was to incorporate a lot of these other characteristics of entrepreneurialism that we talked through earlier, which aren't necessarily always as easy to access in a corporate structured environment. And also just I knew it was the right time for me. So I'm currently setting up my own real estate investment and development firm. As kind of I mentioned, with my focus being on, particularly with my commercial background, reimagining and transforming the worlds of work and affordable urban living and how we build both of those worlds to hopefully maximize greater human flourishing and greatness. And frankly, and also what we've done here, Joy and I started 1776 forward, and now I guess it's been 4.5 years ago. This is, as we mentioned, we're even structuring it to be more entrepreneurial endeavor. And so as I've pursued both of these, I've kind of even seen the integration between the two, and that the questions we're asking here and the movement, the society, the virtues that we want to promote through the vision of philosophical liberalism dovetails with the world I want to create in bricks and mortar on the real estate side. So, and I would say probably one of the most relevant, in addition to everything else we've said about why we're taking the entrepreneurial approach here, which I have seen firsthand throughout my career in the business world, these principles at play. Perhaps one of the more relevant principles to note here of what we're doing is just the value of experiment and the necessity of experimentation. So I would say that the background I bring from the business world is relevant here insofar as what we're doing is a new experiment. And I think it's a necessary experiment to hopefully find new, more effective ways to galvanize for greater human freedom and flourishing. And so that's one principle we're going to model here through seeing how this experiment goes, one way or another.
And let me say something for the both of us that the way that you've kind of laid it out, and it is somewhat true that when we started out, that I perhaps leaned more toward the intellectual side of things, and you leaned more toward the action and business side of things. But even from the very beginning, even when we became friends, I think part of how we even became friends was as much as I leaned to the intellectual, I was never I was never going to be satisfied cooped up in an ivory tower. I always wanted to be
Yep.
able to figure out how to generate ideas that could matter and make real change in the world. And you were someone who, as much as you were passionate about business, always approached business from this deeper philosophical perspective. So I think both of our stories are perhaps examples of how perhaps over a 20 plus year period, a person can grow into becoming more of who they always were supposed to be. And I think perhaps both
Mm,
our stories illustrate how entrepreneurship allows that to happen. That as human beings, we all are combinations of both thinking beings and acting beings, and we need to bring that together. And maybe this ties into again to what the
in harmony.
entrepreneurial spirit is all about, that we hope to help facilitate and empower for other people. And for those of us, who already agree on that and are coming into this, and then for those who are perhaps where Chris and I were 20 years ago, of, getting more on that path of having that greater integration of what was always there.
Yeah, maybe just one other point I want to emphasize here is, especially since we've thrown around and what we first defined and now we've used countless times the concept of entrepreneurialism, um, and that is certainly the background that both Joy and I bring to this. But I just want to return to the point that you, I think, rightly made about entrepreneurialism is that it's not just a business endeavor here. So, this is more about the spirit of entrepreneurialism and the character virtues that we talk through and define that it entails because this, don't get the wrong idea, I guess, or I don't want people to get the wrong idea that we're advocating you need to go into business or start a business venture in order to be entrepreneurial. That's not the takeaway here. It's bringing this integration of thought and action of kind of a first principles rethink of whatever your endeavor or field of interest is to make new contributions to it, and then seeing the value of connecting those thoughts with making positive change, taking your power to make that positive change to actually effectuate it in the real world. So, this is my call to basically for everybody out there, whatever your field of endeavor is, to think of yourselves as an entrepreneur.
Exactly. I'll just reiterate my point that the characteristics in my own definition focused on being mission driven, results oriented, having something that was a new startup and a long term project, but that could be a business venture. It could be a social organization. It could be something that you're doing locally within your community. And it could even just be a long term personal project, just bringing the aspects of the entrepreneurial spirit to that work that you're doing.
Yeah. And another term that's gaining more purchase in the lexicon and the zeitgeist these days is thought leadership. Obviously, what we're doing here is heavy on the thoughts and ideas. I mean, by definition, we're going deep on a statement of political moral ideas and philosophical liberalism. So, um, you maybe just want to talk a little bit. We emphasized in the last point about our backgrounds about the kind of the entrepreneurial experience we bring to it, but then also kind of maybe shifting back more towards the intellectual side. What does thought leadership mean to you, and kind of how how do you think it's relevant to what we're also doing here?
Absolutely. And so I'll share with you, it's definitely, the term is definitely in the zeitgeist. And I know it, as I've heard it, that people love it and also hate the term. And it's true, we're living in a time when anyone can be a thought leader. Anyone can just jump online and get onto a platform like Substack or LinkedIn and share your thoughts, become a thought leader. I think there's a lot of pushback against the term from people who feel that perhaps they're being now expected to be some kind of thought leader and contribute posts on LinkedIn or something like that. And I know there's people who really do not like the term, but I absolutely love the term thought leader and embracing it 100%. And I think part of it just comes from my background, where the term that had been bandied about 20 years ago when I was starting my career in academia was this term of professional intellectual, which never sat well with me at all. Again, because it just sounded too ivory tower to me. As much as I love ideas and I understand the importance of ideas to make real change in the world, the whole point of the ideas is to make change in the world. And so, I was never going to be content to be cooped up and trapped in that ivory tower. And what I love about thought leadership is that it brings together both of these ideas. It brings together the thought, the thinking, and we're going to hopefully exemplify and encourage everyone else to ask their own fundamental questions and do their own deep thinking. But not only to think, but to be a leader, to take real action in the world and to really strive for change and making a difference. So I absolutely love the term thought leadership. And I think that is exactly what we're going to be doing. Hopefully, we're doing it already, and we'll be doing more of it as we go on.
I love it. Yeah, the only thing and from my perspective, I would just I I frankly am a champion of what you described of this new era where because of technology, it has democratized both access and platforms or the creator side, that anybody can, in theory, become a thought leader. And certainly for professional intellectuals who want to protect kind of their guild, if you will, of what it means to advance to that level, to earn that title, that may be seen as a threat. But to me, I think this is a good thing, because to me, the real qualities of thought leadership, which we are certainly seeking to embody in our work, and that when I look out at others who I define as thought leaders, what I think stands out about them, um, it really isn't about having credentials or a certain background per se, but more, again, the spirit, the attitude, the method and approach that you bring to ideas, and also certainly the leadership component of it, which is taking leadership, putting yourself and your ideas out there. That certainly, I think, is the leadership part. So not everybody has to be doing it, but to me, anybody who wants to can step up and be a leader. And to me, some of the key qualities that it entails is getting clarity first and foremost in your own head of what it is you think and why, having that authentic, genuine kind of view, if you will, then being able to articulate it in a compelling manner so that others value and want to follow what you're saying, and then kind of having that novel or unique perspective, insight, experience, style, tone, kind of whatever you bring that's unique and original to the topic or issue or field that you're covering. To me, those are some of the key characteristics of thought leadership, what thought leadership means to me, and what I hope to uh, embody and develop as we go through this project.
And I think this is a great time to even put it out there and perhaps tease that one of the core convictions that we have of what philosophical liberalism entails and what our movement entails is a movement of leaders among leaders. And so that's something that we are, as you're pointing out, trying to both embody and encourage. And hopefully that we will be bringing to you through this effort, bringing more leaders stepping up into their own leadership and power and capacity, and that we're all able to grow when leaders share their leadership with others.
Wonderful. Well, anything else you want to add or say here? I think that was a pretty detailed dive into our backgrounds too, and I think we've covered now the five W's plus the how. So
Yes,
we cover everything.
yes, I think so. And if we
Awesome.
didn't, we've got 2 years worth more of content to share with everyone. So I think at this point we can transition into how hopefully we will end all of our episodes, which is a call to action, but not the kind of call to action that you usually see in a normal pitch, because this is a call to actual action. We want to encourage everyone both to ask questions and evaluate ideas and think it deeply, and also to start taking action. So, Chris, you want to share our call to action for this episode?
Yeah, it's a very simple one. For this first one, we want to just encourage everybody to follow the thought and action principle. So, kind of just to even get people started, we'd love to hear and to build some of that early participation that we're after. Hear what you guys are thinking and kind of how you feel about some of the issues we're raising. We'd love to hear in a simple sentence or more if you choose, but it can just be as simple as a sentence. What does freedom mean to you in your life? And thinking through kind of how you would define it, and then the action is merely just sharing it with us. And I will plug the Substack here. If you're watching this video on YouTube, because we do cross post on all of the platforms in which we're active, and the videos will lie on YouTube. Uh, Please do subscribe to the Substack and send your comments through there. You can either comment in the comments section at the bottom of the post here. You can send us a DM through the app, or once you're subscribed to the newsletter, you'll be getting email versions of these posts as well, and you can reply to the email. Any of them work, but sending it through Substack is usually the best way, because the other platforms are more for how we are propagating the materials, but we hope to funnel everything, the back and forth with you, our members, through Substack. So send it to us on Substack. Your thoughts on this? We'd love to hear it. Let's get those thought and action juices flowing, and we're going to hopefully have some form of a call to action at the end of every session, just to help make this principle that much more real, and to our effort to help show how we all can take back our power on these issues, and so that they're not just kind of uh always abstractions, or just dealing in the ideas side of it.
And to build the movement. The movement is getting started. This literally is day one. Although Chris and I have been working on this for some time, this is the moment of day one of getting this started. So yeah.
Yes.
So
and
find us on
and
Substack at the Philosophical Liberal, and we'll get the movement started.
when we look forward to it. And just as a logistical nod, we are planning to release a new episode every 2 weeks. So that's going to be kind of our cadence. And for those of you who are just following us for the first time, we have a long running separate podcast that we already have going, Free Speech Forward. We're going to be cross posting it under the Philosophical Liberal banner here on Substack, but we release those every other week through our partner organization, the Institute for Liberal Values. So
Mhm.
we will be
And we're going to
doing.
be having a new free market forward
That's
podcast
true.
that
Yep,
people
that's
can be
coming
looking
as
forward
well.
to as well. So
But the point is, we're going to be releasing the philosophical liberals every other week, kind of off of the non-free speech forward podcast release weeks. So look out for that. And as Joya mentioned, we are going to be posing a new question with each week and diving deep on it as we work our way through that statement. So as a preview for our audience, Joya, what is our next question that we're going to cover in the next one?
So the next one is, what is philosophy? Well, the next two are going to be, what is philosophy and what is liberalism. But the first one's going to be, what is philosophy? 'Cause it is philosophical liberalism. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Well, you've already teed
And we've
up
already teased both
some
of
of the
them. So,
issues that we're going to cover there. So I look forward to that one, and we'll see everybody in 2 weeks. And don't forget to sign up on Substack and send us your thoughts.
yeah. Thank you.
Bye.